Well, hello, everyone. Mark Fitzpatrick from Tiger Club of Kansas City. It is Tuesday, March 23rd. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by our guest for today, Alec Lewis, who covers the Kansas City Royals for The Athletic. In the meantime, we're going to talk to former Mizzou letterman Jarrett Sutton, who's just returned from the NCAA tournament in Indianapolis. And I mean just returned. He got back in about 2 a.m. last night. Quick thanks to our sponsors, Conrad's Restaurant and Ale House in Liberty, tigerboard.com, the Sports Scene in Lee Summit, Stables Grill in Kearney, and Chicken and Pickle in North Kansas City. Darren Weidick, once again, is managing the Zoom call, and Paul Blackman and Barry Canner do a great job lining up our speakers every week. Don't forget to check out our website, kctigerclub.com, for information about our golf tournament. It'll be posted as soon as we get more details, but that date is set for July 26th at Lakewood. Couple updates on Mizzou sports from last week. Wrestling team finished in a tie for 7th at the NCAA championships in St. Louis. It's a 6th straight top 10 finish for Coach Brian Smith's Tigers. 3 Mizzou wrestlers earned All-America honors, junior Brock Mahler and freshman Keegan O'Toole and Rocky Elam. And the Missouri gymnastics team ranked 23rd in the nation. They'll participate in the NCAA regionals in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, beginning April 2nd. Also, the university has announced an anonymous $3 million gift to the athletic department, with $1.4 million of that designated for the new indoor practice facility. Let's talk to Jarrett Sutton. Now, Jarrett, nice of you to make that donation.
That's right.
I know you want to man out of it, but
I'm anonymous. So thanks for outing me, Mark.
Yeah. Hey, I know I really appreciate you joining us. Alec Lewis had a phone call. He's going to join us just a few minutes. But in the meantime, we want to hear about your impressions from the tournament in Indianapolis. You just got in late last night. So give us thoughts off the top of your head. What'd you think?
Well, it's been a memorable NCAA tournament to this point, not just the upsets, but I think everything's gone pretty smoothly down in Indianapolis with all the locations and venues. There's a lot of fans down there, but they've done a nice job of still trying to maintain some social distancing, entering facilities. They ask you a lot of COVID questions, and they're doing the best they can to try to limit exposures. Our seats were not bad. I was expecting some pretty poor seats. I'm just happy to be in the venues, but we actually ended up having some pretty good seats to see some great games. And I would say really the second round games were a blast. I did get to see a few upsets in that first round live, but the second round, there were some great games. I was at the Villanova game. That wasn't much of a game, but outside of that, I attended some really competitive games that were down to the wire. And, it was good to have some fans in venues as well, but obviously the Pac-12 is showing out. They're the talk of the tournament right now. I was at Vegas, I was at the Pac-12 tournament in Las Vegas, and saw Oregon State and UCLA and USC, and Oregon State and UCLA being in the Sweet 16. If you would have told me that was going to be the case a week ago, I would have been laughing in your face, because I just didn't expect them to go on any sort of run, and it just goes to show you what can happen in March. So it's going to be a fun Sweet 16. Alabama played so well. I have them in my Final Four, Baylor and Gonzaga. I think those 3 teams right now are really kind of taking the tournament by storm.
Well, I'm in 2 brackets. I had Gonzaga winning it all in one and Illinois in the other one. And needless to say, that one's blown up. But let's talk about Missouri's game on Saturday night. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's always good to be in the NCAA tournament for one. I'll start there. I think the matchup from an 8-9 standpoint, it was a good game, competitive back and forth. I think it's a tough loss for Missouri. Oklahoma was without Davion Harmon. I thought Oklahoma gave Gonzaga a little bit of a run in that first half yesterday, but obviously Gonzaga is just so good and ran away with that one. But it's a tough way to go out just with an opportunity late. You don't execute like you want to do. A lot of conversation around Xavier Pinson and Jeremiah Tillman and managing the personnel and the substitution patterns and the rotations. I went back and watched that final 4 minutes. Just got to get a shot late too when you're down 3. And, I just think Missouri was all out of sorts, and you just don't want to do that, especially in an NCAA tournament game. You want to, at that point, know how to close, know how to execute. And I just don't think Missouri did that. I'm happy for Mark Smith and Drew Smith and just the careers they had. I thought they gave a lot to the program. We'll see what happens, obviously, right, with what their decisions are. They have the opportunity to come back. I don't know if they will or not. But Mitchell Smith and Jeremiah Tillman, I mean, those guys gave a lot to the program, especially Jeremiah Tillman over the 4 years with everything he went through. I hate to see Tillman go out the way he did, and I thought he had a really nice game. And to have a double performance, I think Mizzou fans would have taken that and thought, man, if Jeremiah's got a double, Mizzou's probably winning that game, and they don't get it done. And I thought Lon Kruger had a really good game plan. Austin Reeves was in ultra attack mode, and he had to be. And then Brady Manning played off of him, and they got some athleticism in Alondas Williams and Harkless, and those guys are big time role players, and they stepped up and made some big time shots. So it's a tough way to go out. I hate it for Mizzou fans because I wanted Mizzou to at least get a tournament win. I mean, if you can just check that box, then you take your shot with Gonzaga. And I thought Missouri had a really good chance to beat Oklahoma just on paper, but that's why you play the games, and Missouri couldn't close.
Blair Kerkhoff of the Star had a piece the other day, or yesterday, I guess, that there was a record number of upsets defined as a team 5 seeds lower winning. This is the all-time record in the tournament. Why do you think that's happening? Is this a result of this being just a bizarre season?
I think it's something to do with that a little bit. Loyola Chicago, I know so much is made of Ken Pom and the rankings, and was Ken Pom, those rankings where he had Loyola Chicago, did that make sense for Loyola Chicago to be on a different seed line? And I think Illinois fans would probably say, why were we facing Loyola Chicago? But the reality is, Illinois is a 1 seed, and they got to take care of business. And I think some of these upsets too. I mean, Oral Roberts, I had them the first game of the year. Me and Ben called that game when they played Mizzou, and to see what Mills has done with that team, especially just getting O'Bannon, and especially with Max. I mean, he's playing so well, leads the country in scoring, and so small but yet so crafty. And I'm not necessarily surprised with Oral Roberts because the way that they play, it's a free and easy attack type of system where they have a point guard that can really score, and they got a lot of pieces that can beat you. So some of these teams, Oregon State, they found a way to start defending. I mean, they weren't defending at all, and Oregon State hasn't been in any sort of NCAA tournament game where they're winning games and making big shots, and Ethan Thompson's carried them, but they've got other guys stepping up. And that's the name of the game in March, is that you're playing your best basketball. I mean, UCLA, Johnny Juzang is a very good player. He wasn't really doing what he's doing now at the beginning of the year, and they're finding ways to play well at the right time. And I mean, that's sort of always going to be the conversation in February and March, playing your best basketball. But I think the upsets, I mean, you're Indianapolis, you're not traveling. You are in a bubble, you are in protocols, but I think there's something to be said for that too. I mean, everybody's kind of on an even playing field. And at the end of the day, it's all about preparation. And a lot of these mid-major coaches, I mean, Coach Mills is great. Obviously, we know everything about Coach Moser at Loyola Chicago. I can go on and on about some of these other coaches around the tournament that have put their teams in great spots. And it doesn't always come down to talent either. I mean, talent can win, and we saw that with USC last night. I know everybody's happy on that one on this call, but talent wins in the tournament when you got some NBA talent. I think Arkansas seeing that with Moses Moody, and they got some other pieces that are probably going to be in that conversation down the road. But it also comes down to some of these teams like Loyola Chicago, who just are absolutely flawless defensively. I mean, Loyola Chicago's that defense against Illinois, that was some of the most impressive defense I've seen all year as a team. I mean, all 5 guys, there was no airspace at all for Illinois to drive, and they frustrated Illinois the entire game. And they limit teams to 1 shot. They got a big that's really polished, great footwork, great skill. And then they got some guys that can shoot it. And they have a great culture. And I mean, their chemistry and the way they communicate, it's so good. It's so fun to watch, really. And that's not a surprise. So some of these teams are advancing because they know how to play, and they know each other really well, and they execute flawlessly in the systems that they play.
You're a scout for the Pelicans. We know about Cade Cunningham, Oklahoma State, Jalen Suggs of Gonzaga, Evan Mobley at USC. Is there a guy that we haven't heard much about that jumped out to you as may have helped his draft possibilities for the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, I think 2 guys that jump out that I don't think are a surprise. They shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Is Keon Johnson at Tennessee and James Bouknight at UConn. I know UConn got the first round exit. I was at that one live, and Maryland was great defensively. They were the tougher team, and UConn depended so much on Bouknight. And it goes back to your previous question, Mark. I mean, you ask, what is it in March? I think sometimes teams get really tight and they start playing isolation ball and guys start trying to be heroes. And like the kid at Oral Roberts, Max, I mean, he's a guy that can step up and make big shots. And he showed that, but you really don't want to fall in love with isolation basketball. I mean, you want to really be a passing, facilitating team that moves the ball, that plays with tempo and plays with pace. I mean, I was at Oregon, Iowa yesterday, and the way Oregon was sharing the ball, and Iowa's defense isn't that great. It hasn't been all year, but the way Chris Duarte played, Will Richardson, I mean, they got all these pieces. Omaruri, who's kind of like a PJ Tucker. I mean, they got all these different pieces and parts. And I think Dana Altman is one of the most underrated coaches in the country. I mean, he's so good at what he does. And Oregon is a really good team, and they were great. And the Pac-12 was really good all year. And Oregon obviously was a team that really kind of shined in that league. But I think just to answer your question, I mean, I think Keon, Bouknight, those guys are up there. Scotty Barnes is always going to be in the conversation at Florida State. Moses Moody, I got to see him. He was my first game. Moses is going to be kind of a rotational piece. He's a really big time shot maker. Might have an opportunity to be like a Joe Johnson type down the road if he develops. He's got to get a little bit stronger. But he's the type of that 3-and-D type of player that can step up, make big shots. And I thought he did that in the Texas Tech game. And they had to have that. That game was going to be so ugly and up and down. Chris Beard was going to make his impact on that game. It was going to be a possession by possession game. I feel for Terrence Shannon. He's another name that I would keep in the back of your mind. He's probably going to be a first round, maybe early second round type of player. Super athletic. I feel for him that he missed that layup. And I know Texas Tech is going to be kicking themselves because they ended up missing two, one to tie it and one obviously to win it. So there was a lot of talent down there. It was great. It's great to see the Iowa guys. Joe Wieskamp is kind of an underrated name. He's a shooter. And then the talk of the tournament is Buddy Boeheim, just a big time shooter at Syracuse. I was at that Syracuse West Virginia game. I mean, he shot the lights out and changed the game. And you talk about a team that can win in March. Look what Boeheim's done at Syracuse as an 11 seed, right? I mean, they're in the Sweet 16, and that zone, he's ran that zone, and teams still can't figure it out. And that's really impressive. And then they're not the most athletic, they're not the most explosive team. Like Quincy Guerriere is probably their best athlete. He was really good in that West Virginia game, but they depend on Girard and Boeheim to make shots. Dolage as well. He was in foul trouble. He played with 4 fouls for 12 minutes. I mean, sometimes in March, the ball's just got to bounce in your favor, and you got to be smart. And I will say the whistle in some of these games has impacted some games as well. I don't want to go down that road, but it has made an impact in some of these games too.
Who's your Final Four?
Well, I had Illinois in it, so that's out. I wouldn't sleep on Loyola Chicago to get in the Final Four, honestly, at this point. I mean, that defense travels in March and it wins games in the tournament. And I'll be curious what happens with Coach Moser after this run. I know he's kind of floated out with some other schools. I still think Gonzaga, Baylor, and Alabama are going to be my teams. I know some teams had Texas in the Final Four. I know that didn't go well. Ohio State, that didn't go well. There's been so many upsets, and that's what makes the tournament fun. I mean, nobody's going to be pulling for Goliath, right? Everybody wants to see the Cinderella. It's what makes the tournament great. And I think that's what's made this tournament so compelling. Is just the record-setting upsets. I think we were one upset away from making the record as far as most upsets in the NCAA tournament. But it was fun to be down there, especially in Indiana, right? I mean, to be at Purdue and seeing like Indiana fans and Butler fans at that game. And I mean, it's just a basketball state. So just driving to West Lafayette and going to Hinkle Fieldhouse. I mean, it's been great for the NCAA to have it in Indianapolis. They picked the right location because I think that's going to make it a lot. I think that has made it a lot of fun. And I do think that's what's going to make it fun the rest of the tournament as well.
Note about your old teammate, Kim English. I guess he's going to get a shot at George Mason. Your thoughts on that?
Very excited for Kim. I think he's earned it. I mean, this is a guy that had a great career at Mizzou, NBA draft pick, has been an assistant with Frank Haith, Tad Boyle, Rick Barnes, 3 really good head coaches. He's learned a ton. He's a relentless worker. He's a great recruiter. He communicates so well. He's got a great basketball mind and basketball pedigree, and he's great in player development. He puts in so much time. He's on the floor. He's hands-on. He's a great teacher. He's a great motivator. And I think he's destined for great things. I mean, he's 32 years old. He's a head coach in a great league at a great program like George Mason. But I think what I'm most happy about for Kim is he goes back to familiar ground. I mean, he's from Baltimore. And so he's going back to Virginia, and he's got a lot of relationships out there. And I think that's going to really help him right out of the gate to recruit to Virginia and that Baltimore area. I mean, that's where he's from. He knows that area like the back of his hand. And I think that's a great starting point for him. And, you know, he's got a lot to learn. Obviously, he hasn't been a head coach yet, but he's been under some great teachers. And I think he's seen it all. And I've seen him evolve as a coach. I mean, you see him on that bench at Tennessee. I mean, he's involved. He's plugged in. Coach Barnes and him can communicate in game. And I think he's got that mind that is with the modern game. I think he's got a great ability to look at adjustments. He was that as a player too. I mean, he's one of the smartest players I've ever been around, not just as a teammate, but even, you know, as we've kind of grown into our careers now, I still stay in touch with Kim and communicate with Kim. We share a lot of like reports, and we talk about players, and you know, he's just got a great understanding of players, the game, how it fits, what style of play. And he always is taking notes and learning from everybody. So I'm excited for him. And I know Mizzou fans, I joked this morning, I think Mizzou fans will probably be big George Mason fans looking at those teams and those games and trying to see how Kim does. And I'm just glad that he's getting his chance and his opportunity, because he's wanted to be a head coach. And the fact he's that at 32 years old is quite impressive.
Well, you and he both have high basketball IQs, and it's great to talk to you. And Alec Lewis is in our waiting room now, so we're going to let him in. Thanks for pinch hitting.
Yeah.
Get some rest, man. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Thanks, Jarrett. Jarrett Sutton, scout for the New Orleans Pelicans and former Mizzou letterman. Is Alec? Well, there he is. Alec, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it. In this job,
we locked up?
We are locked up. Yeah, we'll wait for Alec to come back. I think he dropped out. Nope, he's still here, but I don't know if you can hear us, Alec, but you have locked up on us. So we will wait for your return. So we'll watch for you.
Little bio on Alec. He's a staff writer at The Athletic, covering Kansas City Royals, and a graduate of the University of Missouri School of Journalism. He was hired to cover the Royals while he was still at Mizzou. He's also covered Mizzou football for The Athletic. For that, he wrote features and reported for the Columbia Missourian. He's also done internships at Yahoo Sports, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Kansas City Star, Columbia Daily Tribune, and in his native Birmingham, the Birmingham News. Have we got Alec back yet?
He is not back. He has completely dropped, so I'm sure he's restarting, Mark. So I will watch for Alec to come back, but he is not back in yet.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting on that, don't forget our last Zoom call of the year, of this school year, will be next Tuesday, March 30th, and we will wrap up with our buddy Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star. Blair has been picked up the Mizzou beat since Soichi Terada headed for Boston to cover the Celtics. So we look forward to talking to Blair about that.
I believe we have Alec back now, Mark, if you want to give him a shout.
Okay. Alec, are you there?
Take two. Sorry. No, I appreciate you guys having me. Not quite sure what's up, but no, I was saying, in this job, covering a baseball team day to day, as I've learned, things pop up, conversations pop up, and it's an off day for the Royals, but it's been one of the busier days the last few weeks. So
you got some breaking news for us, or?
Unfortunately, a lot of it is, I think I've learned so much. I mean, I know I have, but you check in with people on a constant basis, and the conversations between team and player and everybody, it's a fluid thing. And so for me as a reporter, you want to jump in those conversations. You want to know what those conversations entail. But I'm so young. I've learned so much. And so it's a continuous kind of progression for me in terms of knowing, I guess, what I need to be doing on a daily basis, what conversations I need to be having. But I love it. So it's easy to jump in that learning experience. So I'm thankful for you guys for having me. Sorry for the delay, but I'm really happy to be here.
Well, Jarrett Sutton pinch hit for you for a little bit, and there was a lot of talk about the NCAA tournament. I gave you a scintillating introduction, so we'll move on to the questions. Hottest news off the press for the Royals, the Sal Perez contract. interesting perspectives on it. I listened to Buster Olney's podcast with Tim Kirchian yesterday, and very complimentary of the Royals and their attitude toward their players. They don't operate. I'm going to pick out a couple clubs like the Mariners or the Rockies. Your thoughts on this contract for a 30-year-old catcher?
Yeah, it's really rare in this day and age for small market teams to keep the players that are the cornerstones of their franchise. I mean, I think that's, you mentioned the Mariners, some of these clubs that have, I mean, the way they operate is almost baffling in terms of professional sports and competition. And so to see the Royals do this, I've known they wanted to do it for a long time. Ownership and the front office actually flew down to Florida to meet with Salvi, have dinner with them in January. So it's kind of been they've wanted this to happen if Salvi wanted it. And it was always going to be up to him because his free agency was looming, and he's a talented player. But it says a lot to me. I mean, I think when John Sherman purchased this club, I believe that was in the fall of 2019, there were a lot of questions like, how would he, I mean, if you look at history, how would he operate? And this was, to me, I mean, one of the foremost examples of how he will operate. And that's when there is a guy who is a franchise cornerstone like Salvador Perez, who resonates with the fan base, but is also essential to the roster, then they're gonna pay that type of player. This is the largest contract they've ever paid, the Royals. So to me, it said a lot about him, and it said a lot about Salvi wanting to stay here and how much he trusts the relationship in the city. I thought it was, some people in the business, I think, were like, man, that's a lot of money to pay for a catcher who has had Tommy John. But I mean, if you're the Royals, this guy, I mean, he's been in the biggest moments of this franchise, and they think he will be for the next big moment. So it made sense to me to pay that type of money.
We're talking to Alec Lewis of The Athletic. If you'd like to ask Alec a question, please go to the chat feature, and we'll, at the end of our discussion, we'll fire the questions at him. Alec, you had a great piece about that signing in Sunday's Athletic. By the way, if you out there don't subscribe to The Athletic, I strongly recommend it. It is the best deal for the dollar out there, I think. You guys do a great job. Relation to that, you mentioned John Sherman. He's owned the club for 18 months. He's never had a fan at a game yet, but he was willing to write a big check. He's really, I think, a very active and generous owner, and has a lot of faith in Dayton Moore.
Very smart guy. I mean, Dayton says this all the time in conversations I have with Dayton, but John Sherman is a guy who asks really good questions. He's engaged. I mean, I was in spring training in Surprise, Arizona for 3 weeks, and he was up on the backfields every day, John Sherman. He had walked up there to watch certain pitchers throw. I mean, to watch players go through drills, to watch how coaches interact with players. Like, he's very invested in this, monetarily, obviously, but I think from a passion standpoint, like, he really cares about the Royals succeeding and Kansas City as a city succeeding. And I think he believes those two pieces are tied hand in hand. And you've seen it. I mean, again, when you pay that type of money, commit that type of money, that's about as good of an example of investment as there is. But I think, I mean, you mentioned it. They decided to pay minor leaguers. They didn't lay off staff. They took pay cut. I mean, they have been like the model franchise. This small market team in Kansas City has been like the model franchise around baseball. And for a lot of people, I know that's been impressive. You mentioned Bus. I mean, I hear it from people in the business all the time, how it's like, wow, I can't believe how the Royals operate. And speaks volumes, really.
I know John enough to say hello. I met him through business, and he loves Kansas City. He's a very philanthropic guy, and I think the club is in very good hands. Other topic that was hot was Bobby Witt Jr. Of course, now he's at the minor league camp. It seems to make a lot of sense to send him down for a couple weeks and get that service time. And I want to, as everyone's pointed out, he's never played above rookie ball. So your thoughts on Bobby Witt Jr.? He is a 5-tool guy. How far away is he?
Yeah, I was talking to another player this weekend. They were like, so you're the Bobby Witt guy? Is that like everything you do on a daily basis is Bobby Witt Jr.? And it reminds me a lot of Michael Porter Jr., which at some point maybe we'll get into in covering that. I mean, that's kind of what it reminds me of. You asked how close he is. I think he's really, really close. But as you mentioned, when you've only played 37 professional games, and yes, there was the last season and they competed at the alternate site, it would have been kind of unprecedented for them to push him and start him out of the gate this season. I mean, could he have handled it? I think he could have handled it. He's the son of a big leaguer. His attitude is for a 20-year-old, it's about as, I wish I had that attitude however many years ago I was 20. So I think he's really close. You just need more sample size, because with the guy this talented, when you make that type of decision, you want it to be, he doesn't look back. You don't want him ever looking back. I should have accomplished this there. And so I think the Royals, they just want to be 100% certain. And are you ever 100%? I don't know. That's why they get paid to make the decisions, and I just write about them, I guess. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see when they make that decision and when they believe he is ready.
The Royals line appears to be pretty well set from day to day. The one guy I want to ask you about is Nikki Lopez. When he came up through the minors, he was known as a contact guy. I hate to put too much into spring training numbers, but he's hitting 121. I think he has 13 strikeouts and 33 at bats. Is he fixing his swing? What do you think?
It's a great question. It's going to be hard for me not to be brutal here. I mean, he has just not been able to swing the bat this spring. And I know just from conversations I've had with him and people around him, he put in a lot of work this offseason. He flew out to he really went and wanted to rediscover the contact ability that he showed in the minors. And he said yesterday, he's like, I know it's in there. The problem is, if you're the Royals and you want to win games, it's got to be showing that it's in there. I mean, you can't just say it's in there and roll with them. I think the Royals have a pretty tough decision to make. If you want to compete like they say they want to do, I'm not sure if you can roll out a guy who's swinging the way he's swinging. And maybe that's harsh for me to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Whit Merrifield start at second base. I wouldn't be surprised if that means Hunter Dozier goes back to the outfield, and then maybe Hanser Alberto, who was a minor league signing for them, plays third base to start the year. That wouldn't surprise me at all. If I were leaning, if it were my decision, I think that's the way I go. You can't have a guy who's not hitting. This is the major leagues. That's just not going to work. So feel bad for Nikki. I mean, in terms of like personalities in the clubhouse, he's about as good as it gets. And he's always been great to us. He's been great to me. So feel bad for him. But I mean, again, this game is tough. Baseball is tough. It's you got to perform. That's point blank.
He's an elite defender, but as you said, you got to hit at some point. Let's move to the pitching staff. Looks like 4 spots are set in the rotation. They probably won't need a 5th starter until about mid-April. I was looking at the schedule. Bubic got sent down. Is he the likely candidate for the 5th starter, or maybe Irvin Santana? What do you think?
I don't know if he's likely. I don't know if Irvin either. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Irvin made the team. I think they could use him in a long role, like a short stint. And they've been using out of the bullpen this last week. So just a guy who has experience, I think, could benefit back there. I think the other guys to think about with that 5th starter spot, you mentioned Chris Bubic. I think Jacob Junis is a guy who started around here for a long time, a few years, and just hasn't really been able to put it together. I think another guy is Daniel Lynch. I mean, truth be told, top prospect. I think a lot of, evaluators think he's the Royals' best pitching prospect. He's given up some runs this spring, but his stuff, I talk to scouts kind of daily, and he's got big league stuff, big time starter stuff. And if he continues to trend the way he does, it wouldn't shock me if he was the 5th starter come, I think like April 14th is when they'll need one. But you might even see a 6-man rotation at some point to balance these innings. I know that would be different, but other teams are going to do it. I've heard that. And so I think if the Royals need to give guys extra rest, it could happen. But that 5th spot is going to be interesting to see. It'll give a lot of this year, to me, with the Royals, will give people who care and who pay attention to it kind of an idea of how they operate and why they operate the way they do. I think you've seen that with Bobby Witt thus far. So be interesting to see kind of how that plays out. But I don't think they've decided yet.
Talking to Alec Lewis at The Athletic. Again, if you'd like to ask him a question, please use the chat feature, and we'll get to those in just a few minutes. The it's kind of segue into your comments about innings pitched. Last year, they only played 60 games. You got a guy like Brady Singer making his first appearance in the majors. How many innings can you stretch him to after, I don't remember how many he threw last year, but it wasn't anywhere close to a full season. Can he go to 150, 200 innings pitched with that big a jump?
It's a good question. It's one, like, even executives in the game are like, we're kind of just flying blind with this, because there's just the arm. Jeff Passan, who lives here in Kansas City, I don't know. I mean,
He was our guest 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
talked about his book. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he rewrote 300 pages about this body part that is everything in the game, because it's that important. And to answer your question, I think Brady threw 60 innings last year in game, but they tracked everything he did during the quarantine, before that, throughout. So I think I heard that Daniel Lynch threw up to like 140 in total. So you would think Brady threw around that, maybe a little more, because he had thrown more in the past. And usually you can push a guy 20 to 25 innings past what he had done the previous year. So with Brady, I mean, I think you're probably looking around 150, 160. It's going to be tough. I think that's why the 6-man rotation makes sense. If you want to compete the way the Royals want to, and you're still in it kind of later in the year, you want a guy like Brady Singer still pitching. So that might mean calling up a guy like Chris Bubich to pitch a certain amount, and Daniel Lynch have a certain amount. Jackson, I mean, you're going to have to be really creative. And I know Mike Matheny and Dayton are both very open to being as creative as possible. So I don't know. With Brady, he's going to want to pitch as much as he can. He's the most competitive. I don't say this lightly. He's the most competitive professional athlete I've ever been around. I talking to him, I'm kind of scared because he's just so serious. So he's going to want to go as long as he can. So we'll see. We'll see how long they let him go.
Do you see Mike Matheny using the opener strategy at all?
Could make sense too. I mean, he's not against it at all. I think if you in St. Louis, he might not have been about it, but he did a lot between his time as a manager in St. Louis and to the time he became a manager in Kansas City, kind of diving into analytics. I wrote about that last year, and I believe that 100%. So yeah, I think you could use that. The opener's interesting. I'm very for as much action in the game as possible, because I think people my age, it's hard for them to focus on the game. And so but that said, I'm also for a starting pitcher going as long as they can. Like I want to see a starter go 9 innings. To me, that's the cool part of it. So we'll see. The opener's possible, but I don't think out of the gate you'll see it.
One of the more intriguing guys to me that is in camp, because he's such a legend around here, is Wade Davis. And he was so amazing during the Royals World Series runs. He's not giving up a run yet, but he's not getting the strikeouts. And again, it's spring training. Who knows? He's not getting the strike he used to. What have you seen from him? Is he going to make the team?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember being a senior in high school, sitting at Harpo, or maybe junior, when I visited Mizzou. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. I ended up going to Mizzou for journalism. I remember sitting on my visit in Harpo's one night with my dad and some family friends that we knew, and watching Wade and the Royals in the playoffs. That was 2014, I guess. And it's unbelievable to think about what he did. As far as the present, he's looked really good. The stuff isn't the same. The velocity's not the same, but here's a guy who's been in every war you could possibly be in. And I know that matters a lot to Dayton Moore and to the front office. And so, and I think he's looked dialed in. His command has looked really good. I think he's going to make this team for sure. And I think he'll play a pivotal piece. I mean, he's hit his spots. And if you're doing that at no matter what level, you're going to be successful. And I just think with his experience, it'd be ridiculous of me to bet against him, to be honest. So I think he'll make this team and play a role for sure.
I hope he does. I just loved watching him pitch during the World Series years. It's kind of like getting the band back together. Got Holland, got Wade, got Dyson,
I say it all the time. Andy McCullough, who's with The Athletic now, I mean, he covered for the Star during those runs. I feel like I'm like living Andy's world in a weird way, because you have all these guys back. But it's cool. That's fun. And I think a lot of it, maybe we don't talk about it enough. They think a lot about this front office thinks a lot about like clubhouse culture. How happy are they on a daily basis? Who's going to lift them up when they're down? Who's going to kind of come alongside the young guys? And I think that's why they've signed a lot of these guys. Gerard Dyson's going to light up the room every time he walks in. And that's important to them when a team's on a 5-game losing streak, because it's a long season. It's a grind. You need those type of guys.
Couple questions from our viewers. Is Andrew Benintendi healthy enough to return to his productivity from his days in Boston?
I think so. And his swings looked really good. I've heard some stuff from scouts of he's swung and missed a little bit of fastballs in the zone, which is a little bit concerning. But I think overall, from what I've seen and just heard, I think he has a chance to really do damage at Kauffman Stadium if he just drives the gaps. Those are doubles and triples waiting to happen. And he gives you a competitive at bat, which over the course of these last few years for the Royals, you've seen Whit Merrifield give competitive at bats, Salvador Perez, Jorge Soler, but other than that, Hunter Dozier. Other than that, though, it's been kind of a quiet lineup. So I think he is healthy and ready to go, and I think ready to prove people that he is the guy that he showed in 17 and 18, really.
Alec teased us with covering Michael Porter Jr. Any good stories or insight there?
Oof. That was I was a junior, and part of my classwork was covering the basketball team for the Columbia Missourian. And I thought about studying abroad. And then when Michael Porter committed, I was like, I can't study abroad. I have to cover this because you never know where it's going to go. That was an interesting decision. 2 minutes into the game against Iowa State. In terms of stories, I mean, I don't have anything like behind the scenes crazy. There's so many just flashbulb things that just run through my head with that. The whole thing was so crazy. The injury, how that happened, when it happened, what they thought of it, what he thought of it. And then the teasing of coming back and then actually coming back. I mean, I look back sometimes and go through some of the stuff I wrote. I went back when Mizzou was when they played the other night, I went back and read the story I wrote the night they lost to Florida State. And it was about Michael Porter in the locker room that night. And it's just baffling to me to think about how that year played out. It still baffles me to this day because it was shocking. It was gut wrenching. It was almost teasing at times. It's just, I know I'm not giving anything crazy, but I won't ever forget, I won't ever forget that first night against Iowa State. There was such a buzz in the arena. I remember seeing Reed Nico walking outside the arena before the game. He was so nervous. I remember walking in, and before the game, I'll never forget this. Michael Porter was like on his back, kind of stretching, and Michael Porter Sr. was like he was a coach at the time, on the court carrying a Bible, I guess. And it seemed like they were like yelling at each other. And it was so weird to me. It was like, this is the moment you've been waiting for. Everybody's been waiting for. And they're like in an argument type thing. And I don't know. It was weird. And then he didn't play. And then I was texting the PR, and it was a whirlwind. The next 5 months of my life, it was like, that was everything. I didn't feel like a college kid. I was a beat writer every day. So it was crazy. Still is, to think about.
One of our viewers wants to know where your Alabama accent is. So
people ask me all the time. I don't know if that's my parents got it. I mean, both my parents are from Birmingham, and grew up there. And maybe it was the Chicago people that I was friends with from school. I don't know where it went. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't ask questions. Just it is what it is. Interesting. I don't know.
Who do you root for when the Tigers play the Tide?
It's an amazing question. I'm a UAB fan. So I grew up in Birmingham, and we had season tickets all my life. So Mike Anderson when I was a kid, Mike Anderson was the coach of UAB, and like Squeaky John, those guys were like my hero. That's who I like think about in terms of sports. To answer your question, it's just like the accent. It doesn't make any sense. I've kind of flip-flop over time. I went to a bunch of the games Cam Newton played at Auburn, and I thought it was just so cool for some reason. I don't know. Looking back, I don't know why. And then Alabama, I mean, I like their basketball team right now. I love watching. I love watching them play. I think that story is really cool. So I don't know. My parents, it's another embarrassment that I don't have a side and haven't picked a side. But
I don't think you have to apologize for it.
it
All right,
is-
back to the Royals. Are you covering the Royals much? Are you going to Arizona much? Or are you doing it from home?
So I was there for 3 weeks in Arizona, and I did 19 days straight of work, up at the facility, conversations all day, writing afterwards. It was just nonstop. Now I'm back in Kansas City, and I'll be here until opening day. So April 1st, I'll be back here. I was appreciative they let us go out there for 3 weeks, and it was cool to be around players. And I told someone earlier today, it was like you have these relationships with front office and players, and it's hard to maintain relationships away from somebody for so long, especially at my age doing what I do. I mean, it's important for me to be around people, and so that it was nice to be out there. But I'm excited for opening day. Very excited.
I think we all are, especially. It really was a void last year not having baseball for such a long period of time. Which of the young guys that won't make the roster has been the most impressive?
It'd be easy to say Bobby, but I'll give you a name that nobody knows, and it's a guy named Emmanuel Rivera. He's a young third base prospect from Puerto Rico who they drafted in like the 19th round. A guy came out of nowhere, and he's been in this big league camp. He's always been a guy that's been able to hit and field, but just hasn't put it together. And then this offseason, he went down to Puerto Rico and played in winter ball there, and really did well. I mean, he was almost an all-star in that league, and then has come to this big league spring training, and I think he has like a 900 OPS, has impressed everybody. And this is a story that I haven't written yet, so you guys are I guess this is the early rendition of me talking out my story. But he's a guy who, if Nikki isn't playing second base and you need a third baseman, at some point this year, he might be a guy that fills that spot. I mean, he can really hit. He's kind of a big presence. The other guy I would say is Kyle Isbell. He's a third-round pick from 2018, outfielder, just an old school player. He hits really well, plays a lot of defense. Those two guys, besides Bobby Witt Jr., are the position players to me that have jumped out the most.
What are your thoughts about Tony La Russa coming out of retirement to take over the White Sox?
That was shocking. I did not expect that. I remember seeing, I think Bob Nightingale at USA Today had that first report, and I was like, is this a joke? I just didn't. But the interesting thing for me is I've talked to Tony maybe 3 times over the last year and a half with Mike Matheny. I mean, I before Mike got hired, I texted Tony. He called me in 10 minutes. We talked for 20 minutes and I was like, I'm this young person talking to Tony La Russa. I was like, this is the coolest thing that he's going to call me. Then obviously he gets hired, and then there are the reports about the DUI, and with that clubhouse, it's very interesting. I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm intrigued by it. But the White Sox are a really talented team. So as long as he doesn't make anybody mad, I think they'll probably win games. I don't know why they wouldn't. But he's also he's a smart baseball guy, so I wouldn't put it past him for him to succeed. I know that might be ridiculous of me to say, but I think from what I've heard, things have gone well so far. So we'll see. But it was a weird, shocking one for sure.
Next question: who gets a backup first base job, O'Hearn or McBroom?
Why don't they take both? It's something I've thought about. If they want to win every game, Mike Matheny loves using his bench. Why don't you have a left-handed pinch hitter who can hit for power and a right-handed pinch hitter who can hit for power? To me, that seems possible. Ryan McBroom, I think he's always been a guy who's like passed up. He was with the Yankees, never made it to the big leagues because of what they have. Then he's been with the Royals and hasn't been able to play every day. So if I were to choose one, I'd say McBroom, but I wouldn't be shocked if both made the team as bench pieces who could contribute in late inning, need a hitter spots, really.
couple other guys I want to ask you about. Michael Taylor's had a pretty strong spring, and it looks like he's won the center field job, I would say. And then the other guy is Jorge Soler, healthy.
Yeah, Jorge Soler is healthy. He's an interesting one, especially after they extend Salvi with that much money. Soler's on the final year of his deal, final year of arbitration, so he'll become a free agent. I don't know if the Royals have enough to be able to extend both of those guys. So I don't know. Maybe a trade at some point is possible too with Soler, unless they're competing. So he's an interesting one. It'll be all year. That'll be an interesting one to follow. Michael Taylor has looked good. He's on a 1-year contract, so it's really just like, show us what you've got. I think in the outfield he'll be really good. The pitchers will really like having him back there because that outfield is tough and he can play it at the plate. It's really, you don't know what you're going to see. I mean, he's looked good, but you're now going to be facing big league pitching every day in big time competitive environments. So time will tell, but I think his contract for a year kind of, to me, speaks to what the future could hold. Maybe he performs really well and he's back, but maybe a guy like Kyle Isbell proves he's ready, or maybe they decide Bobby Witt Jr. makes sense in center field. And so I think this 1 year kind of stint with Michael Taylor allows you to compete this year, but also set you up for flexibility in the future. That's why I think that signing made a lot of sense.
Question: the Royals they signed a new TV contract last year. Any thoughts on where they go on the next media contract?
Yeah, I mean, some of my age, I guess, I always think about streaming. I mean, you saw what the NFL did. I think Thursday nights are now going to be on Amazon, which is weird to say, but I think the next contract, it just has much flexibility to grab a younger audience, to grab more of an audience. I think that's going to be a focus going forward for them. I think this media contract should give them some more flexibility from a payroll standpoint. How much, I don't know ultimately, but I think it will give them some. And then I hope there's been an issue with streaming right now with Bally Sport, and I hope they can come to an agreement with that, because I've heard a lot about it, and I want people to be able to watch their team. I mean, like, this is professional sports. This is like a central part of the city. So why can't, I mean, I just, people should be able to watch their team. That's baseball. Whatever we need to do to make that happen. I don't know why it's so difficult, but we need to make that happen.
Well, coincidentally, this afternoon I have AT&T coming out because YouTube TV is not carrying Fox Sports Regional, and I need to watch the Royals. So it's complicated these days. Hey, let's wrap up. The Royals have of their 9 projected regulars, 5 of them are between the age of 29 and 34. They went out and made some off-season moves that were, by Royal standards, pretty aggressive, I thought, like Carlos Santana. They look like they think they can maybe push for a playoff, but it's a tough division. Put on your prognosticators cap. What's the over/under on wins, and can they make a push for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think the over/under on wins is probably around. I mean, I think Vegas has it like 72, but I would say probably like 77 to me makes more sense. I think this team, health permitted, has the potential to surprise a lot of people, because they're gonna make it tough on opposing teams from a lineup perspective. They're gonna strikeouts might be an issue, but they're gonna give opposing pitchers some headaches with what they can do on the base paths too. So I think they can surprise some people. The White Sox are going to be really tough to overcome. They beat the Royals 9 out of 10 times last year, so that's the team that I'm just not so sure about. The Twins in Cleveland, the Royals split with last year, so I really wouldn't be surprised if they beat those guys a fair amount. And I just think they could surprise some people. This clubhouse is really hungry, and that might be a cliche of every spring training. A clubhouse is excited and hungry, but I really think right now that they like guys like Whit Merrifield. He's sick of losing. Like, I talk to him a lot. He's sick of losing, and I think they all are. And what that ultimately means, I don't know. But I think if they stay healthy, and the pitching comes along, they have a chance to really surprise some people. I know they think that. I really do too.
All right. Well, I'm really excited. Alec, thank you for your time. I think you're a real rising star in the journalism world, and proud that you have a Mizzou journalism degree. If you wouldn't mind sticking around for just a minute after we wrap up, I have to ask you a couple things off the air. So, folks, that'll wrap it up for today. Again, our last call will be next week, and our guest will be Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star. Blair's always a great guest. And again, if you want to give us feedback, don't always reach out to info@kctigerclub.com. Everybody have a great week. We will see you next Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.